And welcome to another edition of the National Hockey Now podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Murphy, producer Blake Thorne alongside as well. And we're psyched to get right into it and welcome on an old friend of mine and a new NHL head coach. He's the new coach of the Anaheim Ducks, Greg Cronin, join us. Crow, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Unfortunately, I'm out in beautiful Southern California, but I don't get outside of the arena. I get in there at like 6:30 and I leave at like 5:30 because development days. So I've had long days here. It's pretty quick baptism into the organization, but it's a healthy one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're lucky you don't have that humidity that we got back here right now, my friend. There was no spring. We jumped right into it. It's 95, hot and humid, but hey, I guess it's better than the weather we've been having. Greg, just take us back. How did the situation come about with the Ducks, and how did it lead to you getting hired?
Well, this business is about networking and who you know, and then you're that, like, whatever that is, 3-degree separation from somebody else, and has been well documented. I've coached a long time, and I'm not a networker. I just kind of stay in my lane and I coach. I kind of joked around, like, there's always power brokers in every industry, right? And so when I started, and you remember this from the Long Island days, I mean, Mike Milbury, he was a power broker. Brian Burke was a power broker. Paul Holmgren. Then you get into, Dale Talon. Those are the guys that were kind of my guys that blessed my initiation into pro hockey. And they, as we get older, they kind of go to the sidelines, and then there's a new generation coming in. And I don't really have connections with the new guys. Dave Nonis was the next guy. He's out, and God Snow is out. So they're all on the sidelines. And it's ironic that I end up getting a job when I don't really have anybody in that mixture, right? So it ends up happening that Craig Billington had played with Pat way back when they were they were using the green uniforms in New Jersey back then with the Devils. And so that was like my first connection with Pat. Obviously it was indirect through Craig. And then it just so happens that Pat is following my team because he's looking at some of these younger draft picks that we had playing for us. And he liked the way we played, and that kind of provoked him to do a little research about me. And then, as we started winning, we had a crazy year. We went through 55 skaters, which is an incredible amount of guys. And you guys could follow from the NHL because the Avalanche had 11 injuries for a chunk of the year. So the domino effect, hits us. So long story short, he watched, he liked what he saw, the way we played. So it kind of, motivated him to get to know me. And then we meshed right away from the moment we met. And I didn't know it was going to end up being the head coach, but it was a good start to a relationship, and it ended up me being named the head coach like a month ago.
Nice. Now, you talk about you worked with so many youngsters, obviously, over the years, whether it be in your college days or in the pros, in the AHL. This is a team that's littered with young prospects and young players, finding their way right now and becoming men in the NHL, so to speak. How excited are you to kind of nurture them along and take them to the next level?
Well, I mean, it's an awesome opportunity for me. Like, every coach has an identity. Guys come through junior, guys go from playing to coaching. I mean, I took a different route, right? Because I didn't play in the NHL. I didn't play in the AHL. And I played a lot of sports growing up. And then I was fortunate to get involved with the University of Maine when Sean Walsh and Grant Stanbrook were there. And those guys were really, like, for me, they were way ahead of their time. Grant Stanbrook's one of the best teachers I've ever been around. And that's just kind of weird how it happens. So you kind of gravitate what your strengths are. My strengths has been coaching, development, teaching, right? And then I have some psychological things that I think reflect my history, dealing with some personal things. So when I integrate those two kind of strategies, I think it creates a fairly predictable, for me, a predictable way to coach, to create a process that I think the player can track and he can measure. And Pat and I had talked about this, like, you've got to have measurables when you're watching these kids. And I don't know if you were there then, James, but remember Zdeno Chara in New York when he was a 19, 20-year-old player. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to Scotty Niedermayer about this yesterday. Like, nobody back then thought Zdeno was going to be a Hall of Fame player. He was an awkward guy. Athletically, the pieces didn't fit really well. And he was this big giant out there. And and it was just hard to predict, right? So, you go back all the way to him, and then you just kind of fast forward to players that I have had, coaching throughout my career. And I just think that development piece is going to really merge well with the Zegras, the Drysdales, the Terrys, the McTavishes. Then you got this next layer coming up, the Hineses, the Lacombes, the Warrens, the Zellwegers. They got all these young D coming up that are like, first round, second round players that are MVP in their respected leagues. So now, are they mature enough to play in the NHL? Probably not the young guys, but they will be here in a couple of years.
Gotcha. Yeah, Greg, one thing we've noticed, and, I was thinking about it because I watched Mike Babcock's presser the other day when he got hired by Columbus. And, obviously they brought up his past, and then just working with the new generation of players coming through. And we all, it's a different generation now. It's a different mindset. And, I remember having this conversation with you, I think it was last summer, just about how to approach this generation and how to work with them. What are some of the lessons you've learned about this younger generation coming in?
Well, I mean, the one advantage that I do have is I'm old now. Okay, I'm 60 years old, so I've been coaching long enough to know when Mike Milbury would tear a strip off of somebody because he didn't execute a play, right? And then Mike didn't hold back. So and I think a lot of coaches that's going back to Jim Schofield, yelling at referees, and Mike Keenan. There was a tough, in-your-face coaching style that generation understood it, and they knew it was coming. There was no emotional Band-Aids being stuck on a player after you yelled at them. Like, they knew the consequence. And I was talking to some guys about this yesterday. Like, it's so funny. Back then, when you yelled at a player, the other players would be like, to get away from the guy because they didn't want the stink on them, right? Now they come in there and they just try and help the guy out, and they massage him through it. So you have to change. Like, as a coaching now has to change with the generation. I always tell my players, it doesn't mean that I'm better than you or I'm tougher than you, because when I was playing football, I remember this at Brown and Nichols, Jack Eder was the football coach. He was a Korean War veteran. He was missing a tooth here, and he stuck a cigarette in there, and he never took it out. So when he talked, the cigarette was going like this, and the smoke was blowing in your face. So if you messed up, and it wasn't unusual, like if you screwed up a block, he grabbed you by your face mask, and he shook your head, and then he pushed you back. Like, he get fired 10 minutes after that happened today, right? So, but you knew it was coming. Like, when you screwed up in football, you knew you were going to get a whack on the side of the head or a face mask, grab. And like, so does that make me a tougher person? I think it makes me more durable mentally, and I can handle that. Today's athlete, that doesn't work. That's the extreme. If that's the right side, being aggressively extreme, the left side now is a real popular way to manage people. So to me, it goes from being a do it or else relationship to now it's more of a marriage. Like, you have got to collaborate with the player. You've got to make them feel that you're invested in them, and that it's not a unilateral relationship. It's kind of like I said, it's a collaborative relationship where you're working together to find these solutions.
Right. You look at this team, Greg, that you're inheriting. I wonder, when you were watching them from afar, and obviously you didn't know that you were going to end up being a coach, but are there things you remember about watching the Ducks or scouting them or whatever that you're able to apply now? Was there anything about the team that you kind of took with you and now you can sort of insert into your coaching now?
Yeah. So, and specifically the Drysdale, the Zegras, the Terrys, I've coached against them, right? So I know these players, their body language, what they do on the ice, how they play. It's interesting. So, I always tell my teams, like, their players, they all inside their head, they think, have an image of what they are, right? But the most important thing is, okay, how does that compare to what your teammate thinks of you or the opposing player thinks of you on I call the battlefield level, on the bench, on the ice. And then it's like what you guys are watching when you go to a game, you're watching from the press box. So it's kind of like a drone view, a satellite view of the player.
Exactly.
All those views create visibility, right? So you have a different view of that player than he probably has inside of his head, particularly when they're young. When they're older, they start to merge them together so they have a true identity. So I've already shared with the players, like, when I watched you play from my bench coaching the Eagles, and I watched the Zegras or Terry, this is what I saw. It may not be consistent with who you think you are, Pat Verbeek's watching the game up above from a different view. So as a coach, you want to try and get them. If you think about a weather vane, you want them to be north-south. You don't want them to be teetering on different directions. You want them going in one direction. So I've already talked to them about what I saw, and I've asked their teammates about how they feel about them as teammates. So that to me is a platform to start a conversation with. And that's where my relationship with them starts. So I ask them where they want to go. Like, so here's where we are right now. Where do we want to go with this relationship? And that way, that's just the way I framed it. So then they feel that I'm taking ownership as well of who they are as a person, as a player.
That's great. Now, just for Ducks fans that might be watching out there, what is sort of the identity you want to form, or is that yet to be determined for this team?
Well, I know, like, my DNA and my identity is like I'm a fearless person. Like I want to play fearlessly. That's usually going to translate into playing fast and aggressive. But like you said, I don't know these players' DNA. I don't know who's a natural hunter. I always joke around, like when we were walking around thousands of years ago, there were certain guys that were in a tribe that went out and they sharpened their bows and arrows and their spears and they hunted. And other ones maybe didn't want to do that, so they gathered vegetables and roots and stuff like that. Like I don't want gatherers, I want hunters, okay? But maybe some of these guys don't want to hunt. I don't know. But we're going to find out in training camp. We're going to try to put them in roles where they feel they can be maximized.
Cool. Blake, you have one before we go?
Yeah, I got one for you. So what kind of like day-to-day things are you and the other coaching staff pushing to a guy like Trevor Zegras? I mean, he's got the spotlight on him at such a young age. Like, what are you guys saying to him so he doesn't get complacent and he kind of is taking his game to the next level, even at the level he's at right now?
Well, the good news about him, I mean, he's in the media quite a bit. He has those highlight reel goals. The NHL celebrates that stuff. And I think he's got, again, going back to him, his imaging in his head, like he thinks he has to be that guy, right? So our job as a staff is to get him, it goes back to a value system. If you're going to value highlight reel goals and toe drags and, sending saucer passes through 6 people instead of making a simple play, you're going to do those things, right? So our challenge is to change his value system so that he can value playing away from the puck defensively, be a better forechecker. He's not going to wash away what he does naturally well. We're just going to add more layers to that. And that is a challenge. Like guys, it's not rocket science. Sir, your DNA, like I always say, the mind feels what the eye sees, right? So if you see highlight reel goals, you see skilled plays, then you're going to try and do them. So what can we do to maybe shift that focus exclusively on that and to doing other things that are going to make you a better team player?
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Greg, I know you're pressed for time. We're going to let you go, but we appreciate you taking the time and good luck. And when you're back east, hit me up, all right?
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Greg.
Cronin, coach of the Anaheim Ducks, joining us here on the National Hockey Now podcast. And man, I'll tell you before we get Michael on, I don't know if you know, Greg coached Northeastern.
I didn't, but I got to tell you, Jimmy, I love his style. It reminds me of my dad when I was a little kid. He used to grab my face mask all the time.
He's badass. So anyhow, and by the way, I grew up with Greg. Greg and his brother and his sister, who actually just passed away, unfortunately, and God rest her soul. And Greg and his brother babysat me as a kid, and they taught me how to fight. They taught me how to swing the bat. They taught me how to pitch a, they were like big brothers to me.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So I always knew what they were about, and they're tough dudes. I mean, they were always the biggest guys around in the neighborhood and in school. And anyhow, fast forward to when he's at Northeastern. So his first practice ever at Northeastern, I guess before the players got there, he goes out and he had the crew there bring the scoreboard down from center ice, and he hung punching bags from the scoreboard. And he just had the lights on that, and it was dark everywhere else. And he asked the players to come out, and he said, all right, we're going to punch. I'm like, what? Where's the pucks? Where's the sticks? He says, there's no pucks or sticks. We're going to punch. I'm teaching you how to fight. And that's what he did in his first. Now, of course, there's no fighting in college hockey.
No, not at all.
But he said this is going to toughen you up. It's going to improve your agility. It's going to improve your concentration. So let's go.
Wow.
And
of
those players, they were like, wow, man, we're in for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, he's badass, man. Look, that guy earned his dues, man. I'm not just saying that because I know him. He's coached in pro hockey for 25 years. Never got a job as a head coach. This is his first one. So finally he got the chance, and I'm really happy for him.
Big congrats.
And I think the Ducks are in good hands, man. I think that's a good blend. I like what he was saying about how he's going to work with Zegras. That was a great question by you. That's going to be interesting to watch.
He gives me Torts vibes, but maybe not as crazy.
No, but he's worked with a lot more younger kids than Torts.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference there.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff. So
it may suit him
you're
well.
over at Warrior Arena right now. I was just there with you. Bruins development
right by the ice level right now. A couple of guys getting some work, and I don't know who they are, but yeah.
Bruins development camp just finished up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, what was your take, Blake, on some of the young guys for the Bruins?
I thought it was awesome. A bunch of the guys impressed me. Obviously, a few standouts: Andre Gasseau, Fabian Lysel, Mason Lowry, Ty Gallagher. I feel bad for the goalies. They got lit up this week. They got lit up.
Well, that's always the case usually at these things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see more of a goalie just to show himself more in a game action, you know, as opposed to drills. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, and I like he said, he's at the development camp there, and man, he's talking about all the things they got coming. I mean, the Ducks, they have a lot
of back-end guys.
Yeah, man, that's going to be a good team in about 3 to 5 years. They're going to really come to fruition, and that's a good team. That's a team to watch. I mean, that's why they were able to go out and sign a couple guys because they got so much cap space.
They had the most cap space going in the back end of the season. So
that was great.
Sign a bunch of guys.
I totally forgot to ask them about the signings there, but they got Gudas, they got Alex Thorne.
Yep.
Which is that was a big sign.
That's
He'll bring a lot of leadership, cup experience there. That's good for those young kids to have. So,
definitely.
You know, but I look at that team, man. I mean, I'm going to pull up that roster right now.
Because they lost Getzlaf, right? They lost one of their.
Yeah, they lost their captain. I wonder who their captain's going to be now. I don't think they have one. They still have to fill out a roster as well. I mean, I'm looking at their blue line. Their blue line's a little older, so I would imagine they're going to bring some young kids in. Because right now,
they got Bachanine in there right now too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but he's on injury reserve still. But they've got Cam Fowler, Radko Gudas, Bachanine, like you said. So Cam Fowler, Radko Gudas at Fowler's 31, Gudas is 33. You got Robert Hagg at 28. Colton White at 26, and then you're getting young. Then you got Vakanainen coming in. He's 24. You've got Jamie Drysdale, who he mentioned is 21. And then I look down in their system.
They got a big blue line too, Jimmy. I was looking at it earlier, and Drysdale's the only guy under 6 feet at 5'11".
Yeah, and he mentioned Zellweger they got coming too. Olin Zellweger, 19-year-old lefty. Yeah, they're stacked, man. They got some guys coming for sure. That's going to be an interesting team to watch over the next few years. Yeah, but I think they got a good mix there. I'm happy to see Greg get the job. And, hey, that's a good division for these kids to learn in. You know what I mean? For them to come up in the Pacific Division. I mean, one could argue right now that's the best division in hockey. You could make that case. I mean, you got the defending Stanley Cup champions in Vegas. You got the Edmonton Oilers, who are a cup contender. You got the LA Kings, borderline cup contender. So that's not a bad division for those guys to kind of find their way in and get some experience. But
a couple.
What's
we're
that?
going to Buffalo now. We're going to Mike in Buffalo.
We're going across the other side of the country now, up to the Northeast. Oh, we just had him. I don't know what happened there.
I didn't see him in the room.
Okay, I thought I just saw him.
But Sweeney mentioned a couple things that we should probably talk about during that last media scram that I was just at, but I had to dip a little bit early to come over here. He said 1-year deals weren't on the table when they were discussing anything with Tyler Bertuzzi. I've
been writing that all along, man.
Yeah.
So for all those people who want to keep blaming Don Sweeney, why can't you just accept facts? It wasn't his fault. It stinks. It's part of the business, but it wasn't his fault. I mean, they never gave him the 1-year deal. And he chose Toronto. So that's that. What else? Anything else from Sweeney?
And then it was kind of more in the beginning. He was speaking on Mason Lowry. I took this quote and put it on Twitter. Sweeney said, "You love the size, you love the puck poise, and they're very excited about his trajectory. So that he'll get a good year of pro hockey in, and then there's a chance you could see him on the blue line, I think."
Yep. Yeah. No update on Bergeron or Krejci, though, for the Bruins.
Nothing.
And he downplayed any health issues with Bergeron? That's what I'm looking at.
I don't think he mentioned anything about that.
Okay, because there was a report that Bergeron needed surgery. So I guess that's not true. So there we go. And I think people need to move on.
They just saw Steve Conroy just tweeted that Bergeron had a 4th child recently, so that could be delaying his decision as well.
Man. All right. Well, we are going to go to Buffalo now. We'll switch conferences, switch divisions, head over to the Atlantic Division and the Buffalo Sabres, who I think are going to be one of the most exciting teams to watch coming up this season. I have a feeling they're not done adding either. I think maybe we still see something come along down the pike there, but we'll ask our man from Buffalo Hockey Now, Michael Augello. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Oh, you got it perfect.
Awesome. Okay, there we go. Well, good to have you on, Mike. Seen you on the rinks over the years, but glad and welcome to the National Hockey Now Network.
Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate that. It's exciting to cover the Sabres. I also cover the Leafs for another site, and the Atlantic Division is going to be very, very entertaining and very interesting this upcoming year. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of changes. I mean, we were just talking about Bergeron and Krejci. If they truly are moving on, then I think the Bruins might take a step back. Tampa Bay, everything's changing. You got Ottawa and Buffalo and Detroit sort of pushing. Toronto is sort of in flux. So it's going to be a really interesting division.
And let's look at this team right now at the Buffalo Sabres, and we'll start from the goalie out. Mm-hmm. What's your take on the goaltending situation? How much are they gonna ride our man from Northeast in there, Levi? And what else? What do we have to expect from the goaltending?
Well, this is an area that I'm very skeptical about because I think Devin Levi is extremely talented. I think, obviously he won the Richter Award twice. They got him in the trade for Sam Reinhart from Florida. They're very high on him. I don't think they want to block him from being the number one. That's why all the talk about them potentially trading for a Connor Hellebuck or John Gibson or somebody like that was probably not going to happen simply because they want Levi to be the number one. But to put the pressure to have Levi be that number one at 21 years old, I think is where they're making a miscalculation. When you have a team like the Bruins, who are a phenomenal defensive team, and they have Jeremy Swayman, who's a young goaltender. They had Allmark as a sort of support structure, and they had Swayman play, limited amount of games. Here, it seems like the Sabres are wanting Levi to be the number one and to play 50 to 55 games. And I think that is potentially disaster. I think he's talented enough, but count on one hand, maybe Carey Price and a couple others who came into the NHL at that age and played that many games. And Carey Price, actually, I looked it up. He didn't really start playing 60, 65 games until he was 22 or 23 years old. So
they had Halak. That's why.
And right, they had Halak as the number two. And remember, there was some talk about, we should go with Halak instead of Price in 2010 when they had that playoff run. So, their approach right now is Levi and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and I don't know anybody in their right mind who can trust Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen because last year he was good. He was great at times, good at times, and terrible at times. Maybe he grows out of it, but I think they should have gone out and gotten themselves a veteran 1B goaltender to play 30 to 35 games, but they didn't, and they seem right now content on going with both those guys and probably sneaking Eric Comrie down to the minors on waivers, and that seems to be what their plan is.
Yeah, and you look, speaking of Halak, he's still out there. Maybe they could bring him in.
Well, no. I don't think they want to go with a 40 plus.
Yeah.
But if a guy like Cam Talbot, who was out there at a reasonable price, would have been somebody that I think they should have gone for, but they're right now it seems like they're going full force with Levi and Luukkonen.
Gotcha. Blake, you got any questions?
Yeah. So obviously, this. You guys just got Connor Clifton over in the Bruins. Me and Jimmy have been following him, obviously, with the Bruins coverage we've done. Where do you see him falling into the lineup?
Well, I know Don Granato was very high on Clifton. They had a relationship going back to when Clifton, I think, was 15 with the U.S. National Development Program, and he was playing for the Jersey Hitmen. And Clifton talked about that in his initial media availability. I think they see him as either a right side guy on the second pairing or on the third pairing, and they'd definitely be a penalty killer and somebody who's going to eat minutes. I think that there's going to be a delicate balance between him and Eric Johnson. We know Eric Johnson is in his mid-30s, but former number 1 overall pick. I think they want to mix him in with maybe Owen Power. That their shutdown pairing or their number 1 pairing was Samuelsson playing with Dahlin. But Samuelsson could play the left side, and then they have Ilya Lyubushkin and Connor Clifton and Johnson on the right side. That's if they want to go strict left-right. Dahlin played with Samuelsson a lot, and that was their best pairing last year. So I don't know if they want to mess with that. The Sabres actually have 10 defensemen who played in the NHL. They re-signed Cale Clegg. They have Henry Yokiharu. They have Jacob Bryson. They have Riley Stillman. So they have a lot of defensemen, and they're not going to carry 10. They're probably going to carry at most 8. So you could see one of those lower part of defensemen like Stillman or Bryson, which I wrote for Buffalo Hockey Now yesterday. I think you could see one of them getting moved out before training camp.
Muted, Jimmy.
I always do that. I'm the king of that.
4 episodes in, you've done it 3 times.
Every time. Anyhow, Mike, just to talk about Owen Power, and from afar, it looks like he was really blessed to have a guy like Dahlin who had been through what he is going through as, the young stud coming up, and kind of deflected the attention a bit away from him, allowed him to develop. Did I read that right?
Yeah, no, he definitely took the heat off of him because of the offensive burden. Dahlin's the point guy on the power play. He eats 20+ minutes every night. Power had a little bit growing pains early on, but I think as the year went along, you could just see the reason why this kid was taken first overall. And clearly, from what their approach is this summer, Kevin Adams wants to get Dahlin locked up on a long-term 8-year extension. And if all things being equal, I think he'd love to get Power locked up as well. Now, Power might sign a bridge deal similar to Dahlin, 2 or 3 years, that allows him to build more of a resume and then hit it really big in a couple years. But all things being equal, I think they'd love to get them both signed. And I think he's a franchise cornerstone. Him and Dahlin, they love both of them. They're big. They're talented. I think they can both play at both ends of the ice. They can move the puck. So, there is a benefit finishing dead last and getting guys like Power and Dahlin.
All right, let's move up to the forward position. And, we know about Tage Thompson. We know Alex Tuck, Casey Middlestat. Those are people we hear about a lot. Even Peyton Krebs, people talk about. Who's a youngster maybe that we should keep our ear open for, our eyes open as well, going into this season?
Well, one of them would have been Jack Quinn, but he unfortunately had an Achilles injury in working out last week, and he had surgery, so he's probably going to be out until probably Christmas or the New Year. They're not going to rush him back. He's a really talented kid, 1st-round pick. In the gap with Quinn, you could see a guy like JJ Peterka, who hit it big at the World Championships, was the leading scorer for Germany, led Germany to the championship game against Canada. I think he had 10 or 11 points. Really talented kid, 2nd-round pick. Had a good year in Rochester, then came up to the Sabres, played pretty well in a 3rd-line role with Quinn. I think he could get moved up into a top 6 role. Another kid who did really well at the American Hockey League level was Yuri Kulik, who played for Rochester, scored a ton of goals in the Calder Cup playoffs. He's only 19, but they love what they see out of him, and he stepped into a professional league right away and did not show any kind of problems, especially in the playoffs. So I think one of those two are going to sort of step up and fill the gap for Quinn until Quinn gets back.
Blake?
I'm good here, Jimmy.
Are you good? All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask a question about Don Granato, because I remember a time when he didn't seem long for Buffalo there, Mike. And, when they kept him, I think a lot of people around the league were surprised. Think back to that time and why you think they kept him. And now has he fulfilled those reasons, so to speak?
Don Granato benefited from the fact that he followed possibly the most overrated and biggest jerk in terms of his reputation, and that's Ralph Krueger. Ralph Krueger is the Rex Ryan of NHL coaches. He came in as like, he's multilingual, and he did such a great job in Edmonton with Taylor Hall, and almost got them to the playoffs, and it was part of the Canadian Olympic coaching squad, and he's going to bring this team, and all he did was, I think, ruin players or set players back. He did it with Tage Thompson. He moved Tage Thompson to the wing. He did it with Jeff Skinner. Jeff Skinner had scored almost 50 goals, got hurt at the end of the year where he was on a 50-goal pace. Then he decided, I'm going to make Jeff Skinner, a pure scorer, play defensive. I'm going to put him on the third line. Then I'm going to put him on the fourth line because he can't play defensive. I'm going to make Rasmus Dahlin into Rod Langway. Doesn't work. I'm gonna make Brandon Montour play defense. Look at what Brandon Montour did in the playoffs. You guys know what Brandon Montour did in the playoffs. He wanted Brandon Montour to be a shutdown defender. Ralph Krueger, in almost every decision that he made, screwed up. He made Jason Botterill go out and sign. It was either Botterill or Adams when he was first. Made him go out and sign Taylor Hall. When Taylor Hall at $8 million on a one-year deal, when they already had Jeff Skinner. I mean, go out and trade for Eric Stahl. They made almost every move that they made that had a stamp of approval of Ralph Krueger was a complete and utter cluster F.
He didn't look like he scouted the players he had well before he came in. Like, he's trying to make these guys into something or not, whereas he should. I mean, we just had Greg Cronin on, the new coach of the Ducks, and he's just talking about, look, my style. I'm old school. I like to go at it physical and no nonsense and all that. But that's not what I'm coming into right now. These aren't the type of players that I'm about to be coaching, and I have to adapt to them too, just like they got to adapt to me a bit. And I think you're right. When you look back on him, man, he just came in and said, well, this is how it's going to be, and that's that. It's my way or the highway, huh?
I'm going to make these players conform to my system. And that was a complete and unmitigated. I mean, Jeff Skinner, after signing an 8-year deal at $9 million a year, you go out and you try to make him into a Doug Jarvis, into making him a checking forward. It was completely asinine. And the best thing for this organization was when they finally fired him. And Don Granato benefited because Don Granato is a good people person. He's somebody who worked in the U.S. National Development Program, and he recognized talent. I mean, like I said, Clifton was somebody he worked with. Tage Thompson was somebody he worked with when Tage Thompson was 16. He had coached Austin Matthews. He had coached Jack Eichel. So he had a knowledge of all these guys. And I think he's brought that to the forefront. So they have gone out and gotten players that Granato had worked with in the past, or he knew that he could work with. And really, he's a breath of fresh air in terms of, dealing with it in terms of a member of the media, but also the players love him and they think they want to play for him. And they want to win for him.
And similarly, Kevin Adams, when he was hired as GM and promoted to GM, a lot of people kind of twist like, oh, really? But by all accounts, he's turned out to be great too.
Well, there was a lot of skepticism because the Pagulas, the owners of the team, they had taken suggestions from the NHL about who to hire. They hired Tim Murray. That was a disaster. They hired Jason Botterill. I don't think it was a disaster, but it didn't work out. They hired coaches like Phil Housley. That didn't work. And, at a certain point, they just said, screw this. We're going to pick the person that we want. And they knew Kevin Adams. He'd been in the organization working for them for over a decade. So they went with him. And there was a lot of skepticism and not a ton of experience. He made his bones on the three deals that he made within the span of about less than a year, trading Rasmus Ristolainen to Philadelphia, trading Sam Reinhart to Florida, and trading Jack Eichel. He got great returns on all three of them. And because he got those good returns, he's built the core of this group on draft picks, getting Alex Tuck in the deal and Peyton Krebs in the deal for Eichel. And so they hit the home run on all 3 deals, and now I think he's put together a pretty decent staff and a pretty decent scouting staff, and they're an organization that is really on an upward swing.
For sure. Well, listen, Mike, we appreciate you taking the time, and I'd be excited if I was you. You're going to cover a fun team, I think, and they were fun during the second half of last year too. If there were 10 more games, maybe they make the playoffs.
One more win in the bubble and they make the playoffs instead of Montreal. One more win this year and they make the playoffs instead of Florida. So
there you go. Yeah, they're right there, man. That's right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, they're there. They're knocking on the door. It should be fun. And like you said, to start this conversation off, I mean, the Atlantic Division is going to be crazy. Somebody's going to have to miss the playoffs out of there. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be the Buffalo Sabres this year, though. Mike, always a pleasure. For everyone reading, check out his work at Buffalo Hockey Now. He's doing a great job for us, and we'll have you on down the line.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, Michael Augello joining us here on the